Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Middleware Technologies. Today we'll be looking at how we can integrate Sonarqube with GitLab using Oauth 2.0 protocol. Okay, so what we are trying to achieve in this article or in this video is we will be setting up Sonarqube server, which acts as a client application, and the GitLab server, which will be acting as an authorization provider or resource provider server. Okay, so based on how the Oauth 2.0 protocol or the framework works, we will be gaining access to the GitLab server, which is acting as a resource provider, and based on that grant, we will be able to access the Sonarqube portal using this Oauth 2.0 framework or protocol. Okay, so currently I am working on Fedora 37 workstation with Vagrant and libvirt KVM as a virtualization environment provider. Okay, so in case you do not have libvirt KVM as a virtualization provider, and if you are using VirtualBox, that is also fine. So basically what I am trying to do over here is I am going to set up two separate virtual machines using Vagrant. So one is going to be a Sonarqube server and the other one is going to be a GitLab server. So we will get to see what exactly we are trying to do with those two VMs. We will be setting up those two servers and we will be configuring them for the Oauth 2.0 authentication or authorization. Okay, so before getting into the details of the implementation, let us try to understand what is Oauth 2.0. Okay, so Oauth 2.0 provides a secure delegated server resource access to the client application. So what does it mean is, so let's say we have a client application that is now in this case the Sonarqube server, and it delegates the access, delegates the request or the authorization request to the resource provider. Okay, so the resource provider has some resources on which the resource owner is able to provide the grant to that resources. Okay, so based on that, the Oauth 2.0 allows authorization servers to issue access tokens to client applications. So that access token is issued based on the approval of the resource owner who is having the resources on that server. Okay, basically the resource provider server. So in order to understand it better, let us try to go into the workflow of the Oauth 2.0. So if you go into the browser and search for Oauth 2.0, so it takes you directly to the Oauth portal, and here you can click on the Oauth framework, Oauth 2.0 framework, and this opens up the RFC, wherein you can get to see the flow of the Oauth 2.0 protocol. Okay, so this is the protocol flow which basically is followed for Oauth 2.0 based authorization. Okay, so here this is the client application. So in our case it is going to be the Sonarqube server. This Sonarqube server is going to send a request for authorization to the authorization server. So the authorization server is based on the resource owner's acceptance or denial. The authorization server is going to authorize and provide with the authorization grant. Okay, so based on that authorization grant, the client is going to send another request with that authorization grant to the authorization server, and with that it is able to get the access token. Okay, so once the client is able to get the access token from the authorization server, the client will use that access token in order to get the protect resources from the resource server or the authorization server. So in our case, the authorization server and the resource server is one and the same, because we are going to use GitLab as an authorization server, and it also holds the resources like the user profile, user profile details. Okay, and resource owner is basically the one or the entity who is who has the authority to grant or deny access to the resources that are hosted on the authorization server or the resource server. So in our case, like, it is going to be the GitLab server. So this is the high level flow of the Oauth 2.0 framework. Okay, so now let us go into our documentation. So as I mentioned, these are the important parties involved in the Oauth 2.0 authorization workflow. One is the client application. In our case, it is going to be the Sonarqube server. The second one is resource provider. So basically, this is the server that holds or has the resources, like identity resources in, we can say, which is basically like the popular like applications or like Google, Facebook, GitHub and GitLab, which has millions of users already registered and using them. Okay, and authorization provider server is basically the same as the resource provider server. Basically, this server is going to get the client ID, and based on client ID and client secret, based on the request from the client application, and it is able to grant authorization to the resources which are there on the resource server, based on the approval of the resource owner. Okay, and the resource owner is going to be the owner of the resources which are hosted on the resource server. Okay, so in our case, like, we have the resource provider and authorization provider on the same server, that is GitLab server. Okay, so let us try to see, like, how is our project structure for GitLab and Sonarqube server. So GitLab server, basically, like, we are going to provision using the following playbook: Linux provision GitLab server, and it is going to be done in two parts. Like, wherein in the first part, like, we are going to install the Docker and Docker Compose, and like, verify or validate the Docker installation. Once that is done, like, we are going to install the GitLab server. Like, basically, we are going to start up the GitLab server using the Docker Compose, and once that is done, like, our GitLab server is going to be up and running. Okay, and here, like, you can see, like, we have a small basic bash script which basically does a REST API call in order to set up the Oauth 2.0 client application on the GitLab server. Okay, and this is the background file. It is basically used to like, configure the VM, like how much CPU and how much memory we are going to utilize, and we are going to provide the details of the provisioning which a provider we are going to use. In this case, like, it is going to be Ansible. Okay, so let us go further and let us see, like, the Sonarqube server project structure. So it is also similar to what we have seen for GitLab server. So here also, like, we are going to use this following playbook: Linux provision Sonar server, in order to provision the Sonarqube server. So it is also done based on two parts. Like, the first is like setting up the Docker Docker Compose, and the second part is going to be setting up the Sonarqube server based on the Docker Compose file. Like, we will be looking at these details further, and coming to the script Sonar Oauth config. So this is a bash script which we are going to utilize in order to set up the GitLab authentication part on the Sonarqube client application. Okay, and Vagrant file is going to be the server, the file which contains the configuration for the VM and the provisioning that provisioning provider that we are going to use in order to set up our Sonarqube server. Okay, so this is the high level structure of both the GitLab server and the Sonarqube server. Let us go further and see the details about those two. Okay, so let us see like how we can set up the GitLab server using Vagrant and Ansible. Okay, so for that, let us try to go into the shell and let me get into the details of the project structure. So as I said, this is the Vagrant file that we are going to use. So it basically set up the host name, and it uses the libvirt as a provider, and we are setting up the resources like CPU and memory to the following, and we are going to utilize the following provisioner, that is Ansible, in order to run the playbook. This is the playbook that we are going to run or execute in order to provision the GitLab server. Okay, so now let us get into the details of the playbook. So as I said, like this playbook is going to like carry out the activity in two parts. Like it is going to set up the Docker services in the first part, in the first role, and then it is going to set up the GitLab services in the second role. Okay, so now if we go into the Ansible roles and Linux Docker, the tasks main.yaml file. So this is the main tasks that are going to be carried out in order to set up the Docker services. So it is going to install the prerequisite packages and then add the Docker repository and install the required Docker engine packages, and we are going to set up the IDE with like basically we are going to add the Vagrant user as a into the group like Docker, so that we can launch Docker using the Vagrant ID. Okay, and once these are done, like we are going to reload the daemon and start up the Docker services. Okay, so once that is done, like we will be validating using the docker run hello world, and we are going to install Docker Compose further, which is going to be used to launch the Docker Compose services. Okay, and we are going to provide the 755 access to the Docker Compose file. So this is the high level steps that are going to be carried out in order to set up the Docker services. Okay, and if we go into the var section, like it contains the details of the variables like Docker repository, Docker Compose repository, Sonar user, and Sonar group, which are further used in the tasks main.yaml file. Okay, and now let us look at the another role, that is GitLab setup. So let us go into the tasks main.yaml file. So here we are going to use this Docker Compose file like template, and we copy it into the GitLab home, and from where like we are going to use the Docker Compose utility to launch the services present in the Docker Compose.yaml file. Okay, so if we look at into the templates of the Docker Compose, like this is the Docker Compose YAML file, which basically launches the GitLab services. So we are using here like GitLab's community edition image, and we are going to set up the root password basically for the root user, and these are the ports on which like we are going to like basically the GitLab server is going to utilize, and we are going to persist the data in the following mounts. Okay, config, logs, and data. So you can get into the more details of the GitLab server, like how the setup is done, like what are the important steps we need to follow for the installation. But like this Docker Compose file, you can even get it from the GitLab documentation and modify as per your requirement. Okay, and like we have set up some variables also. Like let me show you those variables also. So here, like we have set up the GitLab host, GitLab home, GitLab config, logs, and data which are used in the Docker Compose file. Okay, so these are for easy reference or for modification we have kept in the variables section. Okay, which are further used in the task main.yaml file and the Docker Compose file. Okay, so once like the Ansible section, Ansible configuration is all done, like we are ready to launch our GitLab server using backend up. Okay, so once the GitLab server launches, like we will be able to load the GitLab server and validate the access. Okay, so let us launch back the GitLab server. Okay, so for me like the machine is already provisioned. Like in case like you do not have the machine provision, like you can use the background provision, and if it is the first time like you are running the background up, like it is going to run the background provision internally for you. Okay, so once the provisioning is done, like you should be able to access the GitLab server using the host name that we have provided in the background file. So in this case, like this is my host name, and I will be able to access the GitLab server using the root credentials. So this basically you can change it. So I'm just looking at the Docker Compose file wherein I have kept my root credentials. So this is not basically the way you need to expose your credentials, but this is for a demo purpose like I'm doing. So I'm just updating using the credentials within the Docker Compose directly. Okay, so here you can see like we are able to successfully log in into the GitLab server. So our GitLab server setup is successfully completed. Now let us go further into our second step. So let us go into our second step. So we have seen the GitLab server setup, the Docker setup for the GitLab, and now let us look into the setup for Sonarqube server. The Sonarqube server is also going to be the same setup. So let me go into the Sonarqube folder and let me do ls-ltr. So you can ignore the following files. Okay, but the important file is the background file, which is going to use to launch the Sonarqube virtual machine. This is also going to use the same provider, that is libvirt, and the same Ansible provisioner, that is Ansible, and we are going to run the following playbook within the virtual machine in order to provision the Sonarqube server. Okay, and we have also provided the Sonarqube host name, that is fedsonar.stack.com. Okay, now let us look into the playbook which is going to be executed on that virtual machine. So here also, like we have the same setup. We are going to set up the Docker as a first part, and we are going to launch Sonarqube using the Docker Compose file. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the details of the Docker the Docker setup on the Sonarqube, because it is going to be the same, but we will look at the Sonarqube setup which is going to be carried out over here. So Ansible so let us go into the Ansible roles, Linux, Sonarqube install server, and main like tasks main.yaml file. So here, like you can see, like we have copying the template Docker Compose file into the destination, and we are ensuring that the max map count is set to the required value, which is required for the Elasticsearch service that is going to be started within the Sonarqube server, and we are going to reload the kernel parameters once the max value configuration is done. Okay, and then we are going to start up the Sonarqube service using the Docker Compose file. Okay, now let us look at the Docker Compose file that we are using in order to launch the Sonarqube service. Okay, so that is available in the templates. So here you can see, so this is my Docker Compose file in order to set up the Sonarqube server, and we are using the backend as the Postgres database for the Sonarqube to persist the data related to the configuration and the projects, and we are going to use the following nodes in order to store the persist the configuration for the Sonarqube on the host machine. Okay, so and the one thing that is important to note over here is the host port on which like we are going to access the Sonarqube server is port 80, but internally in the container the Sonarqube is going to be launched on the 9000 port. Okay, so this is how we are going to launch the Sonarqube servers. Let us go into the var section also and look at the vars that we are going to utilize in our main.yaml file. So we are only setting up the sonar home, wherein we will be basically copying the required files in order to launch the Sonarqube service. Okay, so once the Ansible section is configured, like we are ready to launch our Sonarqube server using Vagrant up. Okay, so once this is done, like you should be able to access your Sonarqube server using fedsonar.stack.com. Okay, so ignore this login with GitLab section, GitLab part. Like we will be looking at how the section is going to be configured. So let me just remove that for you, and let us try to configure it again. So if I go into the administration, authentication, GitLab, so let us disable this one, reset, reset, allow user to sign up, don't allow. So we are going to configure all of these things using the bash script. Okay, so let me save it. So now you can see the GitLab login with GitLab option is gone, but we are going to do that part further using the bash script, which is going to call the REST API services. Okay, similarly, like in the GitLab section, like let me go ahead and remove the app. So I will destroy this Oauth based app that we have set up. Okay, so now we are good with the so this is basically how this your setup will be looking once you launch a fresh GitLab server and a fresh Sonarqube server. Okay, so now let us go into our documentation again, and we have seen our step 2, that is setting up the Docker, setting up the Sonarqube server using the Docker and Docker Compose services. Okay, so let us go further down without wasting more time. And now, like, it is the important step, like wherein like we will be like setting up the Oauth client application. Okay, so here before we set up the Oauth client application, like the one thing that we need to do is for our profile, like we need to go into the edit profile and the access tokens, and we need to create a access token. Okay, so once the access token is created, like we will be provided with that access token ID, which you can save. This basically ID we will be using in order to run the REST API calls. So here are the scopes for that access token, which I have provided already. Okay, so you can provide the required scopes for your access token based on your requirement and create that access token. Okay, so once that access token is created, the shell script that we are going to run is GitLab Oauth config. Okay, so let me go into the shell and go into GitLab, and let me open the GitLab Oauth shell script. Okay, so here I'm going to create the Oauth app named Sonarqube, and we are going to use the GitLab URL that is fed gitlab.stack.com and Sonarqube URL that is fed sonar.stack.com, and provide the Oauth app with the following scope, that is read the API, read user, and email. Okay, and here is the curl request, post request that we are going to send to the GitLab server in order to set up the Oauth 2.0 based client application. Okay, so here you can see, like we are in the header we are passing the access token that we have generated, and in the data section we are passing the following parameters, like name of the Oauth application, the redirect UI. This is basically the Sonarqube the portal callback URL, and this is the scopes basically, which provides what level of access is granted to the Oauth application. And here finally, like we have the REST API that is on the GitLab like API v4 application, to which we are going to send this post requests in order to create the Oauth based client application. Okay, so now let us save this and try to create that Oauth client. Okay, so now you can see like our Oauth 2 client application has created. Like we have received this JSON response wherein we have our application ID. So let me copy that application ID and save it in this location, and let me copy the secret also from here and save it in my guide for reference. Okay, so now like we have the two important section, that is the application ID or the client ID and the client secret. Okay, so these things like we are going to use further in configuring the client application, which is Sonarqube server. Okay, so now like we can go into the portal, and if we go into the search admin area and go into the applications, like you will be able to see the Oauth based Oauth client application setup done for us. Okay, so here you can see like this is our client ID, our application ID, and this is a secret that is only shown to you once when we set up, and we need to save that secret. And this is going to be the callback URL for our fed sonar, and these are the scopes that we are providing it to the client application. Okay, let us now go further and try to see like what setup we need to do on the GitLab on the Sonarqube server for GitLab authentication. Okay, so here in this step, like we are going to carry out the steps that are required in order to set up the Sonarqube for GitLab based authentication. Okay, so for that, like let us go into our shell and go into the Sonarqube server, wherein we have the Sonarqube project setup, and let me open the Sonar auth config. And here, like I have used some of the variables, like this is the admin user default admin password. Okay, so I'm like I already have the reset done for the admin, so I'm not going to call that reset password for the admin, because I am able to log in with the new password that I have set up. So I'm not going to do that setup, so we can just ignore this one, but this basically does a curl request in order to change the password for the user. So in case you haven't done it, like you can do that using this functionality. Okay, so so let us go further. Like we have the admin user admin password. The base URL is going to be the fedsonar.stack.com http:// which we are going to set up for the Sonarqube server, and these are the parameters that we are going to set up in order to configure the GitLab Oauth authentication configuration. Okay, so if you see, like this is the function that is going to be called configure Oauth, wherein we are setting up the base URL, we are setting whether GitLab authentication should be enabled or not, that is true, and we are setting the GitLab URL, GitLab application ID, secret, and allow users to sign up. The only thing that we need to change now is the app ID, which we have just generated. So I'm going to update it with the new app ID that we have generated now. Okay, so let me copy this app ID or the client ID, and also we need to update the secret. So these are the only things that you need to update once you generate the new client ID and client secret. Okay, so let me save this one, and now so let me go into, so right now, like if you see, like we have only the login page, the standard login page, like we do not see any login with GitLab page, and also like in authentication GitLab section, like we do not have anything set up yet. Okay, so let me reset. I think I didn't save that one, but this is fine. Like you can just reset. Like the GitLab section is everything is like default, so that is the one thing that we need to configure. And in the general section, like if you go and check the base URL, the server's base URL, this also like we can uncheck, like reset it to the default and save it. Okay, so now we will see like how we can update this configuration using that script. Okay, so let me run that script, sonar Oauth. Okay, so it has done the configuration for Oauth client application. Now let us go into the Sonar portal again. And let us go into authentication. So you can see the GitLab authentication is enabled, and it has set up the GitLab server URL, and it has updated the application ID secret. Okay, and it has enabled allow users to sign up. Okay, so this is all done, and in the general section it should be setting up the base URL also for us. So let us try to see. So here you can see the base URL is set up. So that simple script is going to do the job for our GitLab Oauth authentication, basically setting up the required configuration on the Sonarqube side. Okay, so now if you log out, you should be able to see in the login page. So let's refresh our page again. So you should be able to see the option to log in with GitLab. Okay, So now everything is set up. Now let us go into our GitLab server and let us first log out from here. Okay, so we have both GitLab, so the GitLab server logged out and the Sonarqube server logged out. Now let us try to log in with GitLab on the Sonarqube portal. Okay, so here like we need to provide the credentials for the root user that we have set up on the GitLab server. So let me get that string. And now let us log in into GitLab. So this is the redirect URL that you have received when you clicked on the login with GitLab. Okay, so now it takes you to this page wherein it asks the resource owner, that is me, in order to provide the authorization whether the Sonarqube should be able to access the account details or the user details on the GitLab. Okay, so if we authorize, like there will be a background process that happens, like the authorization token will be sent to the Sonarqube client, and the Sonarqube client is going to send another request with that authorization code and gain access to the access token from the resource provider, that is GitLab. Okay, so let us see. Let us click on authorize, and it should be able to authorize, and you should be able to log in into the Sonarqube. And now if you see the details of the page, the user profile that is logged in, like this is the root user that is actually authorized to access login into the Sonarqube based on the resource details that are available on the GitLab server. Okay, so if you look at the profile on the GitLab server, if you go into the edit profile, like you will see the user email address is admin@example.com, that is same as this. Okay, so here like on Sonarqube like we are now able to log in or with the user, that is the root user on the GitLab server. So basically like we have got the authorization to utilize the resource details on the GitLab server from the Sonarqube server, that is our client. Okay, so this is how like you can do the setup for your OAuth based authorization in the Sonarqube using the GitLab authorization provider or the resource provider. So this is all I wanted to show you in this video. Basically in order to like how you can set up the Sonarqube server and the GitLab server, and how you can configure the client application on the GitLab server, and the required configuration for the OAuth on the Sonarqube server. And then we have seen like how we can validate the OAuth based authorization that is carried out, and like we have seen like what user ID access the resource details are being accessed from the resource provider server. So this is all I wanted to show you in this video. Thank you all, thanks for watching this video, and you guys have a great day.